Well, good morning, everyone. Now, did you know that there are two versions of the Beatitudes? Right, there's the one we just heard from the Gospel of Luke, and Matthew has another version in his Gospel. And frankly, the Matthew version is one we're probably a little bit more familiar with, right? It's maybe a little more popular, if you will. So Matthew and Luke take different approaches to the Beatitudes. I mean, they both have Jesus addressing a very large crowd, people from all over Judea and the surrounding regions. But Matthew has Jesus going up the mountain. It's the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. And Luke has Jesus coming down the mountain for the beginning of the Sermon on the Plain. And it's basically the same sermon, just different settings. But the setting is really important because it speaks to perspective. See, in Matthew's gospel, Jesus has a broader perspective. I mean, think about it. If you're up on top of the mountain, you can see pretty far, right? And probably Jesus could see all of those people who are gathered on the mountainside, so every one of them. And so for Matthew, the Beatitudes is more expansive. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who are hungry. Blessed are those who are mourning. But Luke has Jesus down at ground level with the people. And it's a more intimate connection. Blessed are you who are poor. Blessed are you who are now hungry. Blessed are you who are weeping. And so for Luke, the Beatitudes is more personal. It's more direct. And Matthew, with his expansive view, gives us more Beatitudes, 8 compared to Luke's 4. And Luke does something really interesting. He contrasts those 4 Beatitudes, the 4 blessings, with 4 woes. And I don't know about you, but when I hear those 4 woes, that's kind of my reaction. Whoa, wait a minute, Jesus. I mean, it sounds like Jesus is giving really harsh treatment to those whom we would consider to be successful. And again, it's kind of personal. Woe to you who are rich. Woe to you who are filled now. Woe to you who are laughing now. Lucky for me, I'm not rich, so I dodged that bullet, I guess. But you know what? I do like to eat. I mean, I don't miss a whole lot of meals. I do enjoy laughing. So is Jesus talking to me? Is Jesus saying, woe to me? Well, before I get too indignant, I think it's worth taking a closer look and asking, who and what exactly is Jesus talking about here? Who are the poor and the hungry and the weeping? Who are the rich and the filled and the laughing? Well, I think the prophet Jeremiah gives us some pretty good insight into this question in the first reading. Jeremiah says, blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord. And using the term cursed instead of woe, he says, cursed is the one who trusts in human beings. Well, maybe that's it. Maybe that's what Jesus is getting at. Maybe the poor and the hungry and the weeping are those who put their trust in God, who recognize their dependence upon God. And maybe, just maybe, the rich and the filled and the laughing are those who see their success as theirs alone, with no credit to God. Those who might ignore the plight of the poor and the marginalized among them. So I think Jesus Jeremiah was kind of foreshadowing Jesus a little bit when he says, woe to those who put their trust in human beings and turn away from the Lord. But even so, Jesus is kind of flipping the script on us here by contrasting these blessings and woes. Because I think most of us, when we think of someone who is rich and filled and laughing, we think that person is blessed. We think of someone who is poor and hungry and weeping. Well, that seems kind of woeful to us. But Jesus says, no, that's not how it works. It's not our circumstances that determine whether we are blessed or woeful. It is our relationship with God. The relationship with God makes all the difference. But there's hope. There's good news for the woeful. Because woe does not have to be a permanent condition. You know, when I was a young man, I felt woeful for many years. I had a good job, I had nice things, but I felt woeful because I thought I was in charge. I didn't recognize God's presence in my life. I didn't recognize my need for God. And I tried to fill the spaces in my life where God should be with things that are not of God. And then after several years of feeling woeful like that, my dad taught me probably the most important lesson I have ever learned. See, Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer the day after his 65th birthday. And he didn't make it to his 66th. But in the wake of that diagnosis, Dad felt blessed. And I couldn't understand that. I couldn't understand, how can you feel blessed in a situation that to me seems so woeful? But Dad was blessed because he had a lifelong relationship with God. And he was not about to allow a circumstance to damage that relationship. And he knew that God was with him in that most dire circumstance. And he knew that God was walking that difficult path with him. And that example of faith and courage was profoundly inspirational to me. And it changed my life. Because I wanted to be like Dad. I wanted what he had. I wanted that peace that comes from a lifelong relationship with God. And so I resolved to get in right relationship with God, to put God first in my life. And so yes, when I was a young man, I felt woeful because I didn't think I needed God. I thought I was in charge. And today, I feel blessed. I feel blessed because I have learned to put my trust in God, at least most of the time. And so in this gospel, when Jesus is identifying circumstances that we would consider to be marks of success as woeful, and circumstances that we would consider to be misfortune as blessing, I think Jesus is really challenging us to take a closer look at what we consider to be success. Where do our successes come from? Can we claim them as our own, or do we recognize them as the blessings that they truly are? And the thing about blessings, the nature of blessing is that it cannot be possessed. It can't be hoarded. It has to be shared. The best way to receive a blessing is to be willing to become a blessing for others. And if we can't do that, we run the risk of heading down that path to woe. And so this morning, as we come together to share this most sacred meal, let's pause for a moment and reflect on those things in our lives that are good fortune, those things that are successes, those things that are blessings in our lives? Do we claim them as our own, or do we give credit to God? Do we share our blessings as a way of giving thanks to God? Today, let's resolve to share our time, talent, and treasure in thanksgiving to God. And maybe that's by supporting a favorite local charity. Maybe that's by volunteering or getting involved in ministry here in the parish. Maybe it is by visiting someone we know who might be sick or lonely. However we choose to do it, let's resolve to share our blessings and keep the woe away.